Ishta, hi. Good to have you with us. How have you been?
Hi, Ashu. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Ishita. Thank you for asking. Ishita, this is an important session, an exciting session, right? And I've
Mhm.
actually been looking forward to this session, uh, largely because there is very little which has actually come out, or there is very little which has happened in having representatives from government institutions, especially like Niti Aayog, right? Which has built some incredible schemes to create a very solid impact in entrepreneurship, right, across the country. I think as an institution, they've recognized the potential of entrepreneurship. And I think in a post-COVID environment, it's just become so much more important.
Yeah.
So it's a pleasure to have you with us, right, and talk about many
Thank
things
you.
that you're doing, and your team and the entire leadership at Niti Aayog is doing, right, and the kind of impact that they're wanting to sort of create across the country, across segments, across you know pockets of when you kind of look at India, they operate at many levels, right? And I think
Yes.
with the agenda that is out there, you're trying to create that impact across the board, right, across each income group in many ways, right? So this becomes an important and exciting discussion. Uh, Ishta, before we start that, right, I'd love you to give us a quick round of background. You've been in the startup ecosystem for a very long time, right?
Yes.
Before coming on board with Niti Aayog and leading this entire initiative, you've been on the incubation side of things, so you understand a lot of those issues firsthand, right? I'd love you to take us through your background and we jump into the of all the great work that you've been doing
Sure.
at Niti Aayog and impacting startups across the country.
Sure. So thanks for asking, Ashu. I have about 15 years plus of experience in the startup and the early stage ecosystem of the country,
Right.
incubation, early stage startups, early stage investing ecosystem.
Sure.
So I'm born and brought up in Ahmedabad, and I started my journey or my first job with IIM Ahmedabad's incubator CII Center for
Interesting.
Innovation and Incubation Policy entrepreneurship. And I was there for about 4.5 years, and that's where my the idea over there was to promote the idea of incubation because
Right.
India did not have so many
Right.
incubators at that point of time. And then, of course, I mean, we were sort of learning ourselves of what will work in India, especially a place like
Right.
Ahmedabad, which does not really have a very thriving incubation ecosystem. And then from there, I moved on to I joined the Indian Angel Network Incubator. I
Right.
designed and operationalized that one. Post that, I was with Ernst and Young for 2 years in their development advisory services, where I got a very deep understanding of what impact is all about
Hmm.
and the theory
Right.
of change concept of input, outcome, and impact,
Right.
which I was able to relate with this entire entrepreneurship ecosystem and
Interesting.
how entrepreneurs can actually create an impact for the country.
Right.
Of course, that was also the time that the CSR law was announced, and the
Interesting.
CSR contributions towards incubators were made a part of the Schedule 7 of the CSR law, which was very interesting for me at that point of
Right.
time. And I did help with creating CSR policies and for some of the corporate clients that I was working with,
Hmm.
and did make sure that entrepreneurship is a part of the CSR policy. Post that, I actually quit EY because the dynamism of the entrepreneurship world was calling me back.
Sure.
And I was working with a boutique company which would rate business plans. That's when that opportunity at Niti Aayog came by, and I I took this opportunity because for the first time in the government, someone was doing something for incubation, innovation, and entrepreneurship at this level.
Right. Very interesting.
I know Niti Aayog is like one of the highest, offices, and
Sure.
there was something going to be positioned at Niti Aayog, which is very,
Right.
very interesting. Of course, we did not know what it is going to be like and what our job roles would be.
Right.
And to begin with, we were like 3 or 4 team members who had just joined, and we were the Pune to proprietors for Atle Innovation Mission. So it has been a very incredible journey here. I've been here for 5 years now, and
Interesting.
I have been able to create, contribute to the country from whatever little bit I could do being here towards
Super.
innovation and entrepreneurship.
Super. Ishta, not a lot of people will be able to relate to the fact that the startup ecosystem in India started 15 years back, right? I think the way it's kind of looked in last couple of years, right? I think it's just difficult to fathom, right? Uh,
Yeah.
I've been in it for about 8 9 years now, and and I think we've seen a very different phase, right? Of incubation, entrepreneurship, angel investment, venture capital. I think, it's just become so much more savvier in the last couple of years, right? Uh, Ishta, we're gonna move into the construct, right, that you're leading at Niti Aayog. Now Niti Aayog is you know is
It's an
more like
ocean.
planning. It's an ocean, right? It's more like planning
Yeah.
commission, right? I mean, the idea of Niti Aayog is fundamentally to guide various institutions within the government, and various ministries, right? And to an extent, also even states, right? Kind of guide them, saying that these are the targets and this is how you need to achieve them, and and make that commentary, right? And that's essentially how it's always was supposed to be, right? But in this government, Niti Aayog has actually gone a level beyond this, right? With specially aim-like initiatives, it's gotten into execution as well, right? Where they're actually kind of moving into an implementation zone, right? Now, and like you said, right, it's an ocean. There are many, many layers to it. And sitting on the outside, it's just so difficult to understand each one of them. I'd love you to, as a starting point, right? I'd love you to take us through, what all are you doing, right, at a center level, kind of impact that you're trying to create, state level functioning, right, and how are you engaging with various other institutions that are there, right? Because we also
Sure.
have an Invest India, we also have a Startup India,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Right, and
Absolutely.
and when you start looking at it from an outside, and I think from a commoner standpoint, right, people that kind of are confused in terms of who's doing what, right? Who do I go to?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It just becomes
Absolutely.
difficult. So I'd love you to run us through
Sure. Sure. So to do that, I'll just take a step back and very briefly talk about the background of Atal Innovation Mission. So the Atal Innovation Mission has been established at Niti Aayog by the Prime Minister's office,
Right.
largely because Niti Aayog is an interministerial body.
Right.
So Niti Aayog deals with all the state governments as well as all the line ministries of the Government of India.
Sure.
Think of Niti Aayog as government's own captive think tank, and every advisor over here is linked or tagged to a couple of states as well as a couple of line ministries. And the reason it was, the mandate that has been given to us is to create a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship in the country. So it is not just about, launching a few programs on the ground and creating a few more incubators, but it is about bringing about a change in the thinking, change in the mind of the persons, of the young potential innovators, so that when as they grow up and as they become more mature, they consider themselves to be job creators and not job seekers.
Right.
And that is what we are trying to do over here. So in the past 5 years, and we are fairly young, we are only 5 years old. And in the past 5 years, what we have done is we have created 9,000 plus Atal Tinkering Labs across the length and breadth of the country, which covers more than 90% of the districts of India. We have created more than 70 Atal incubation centers, which again are spread across states and specialize on different areas like agriculture, EV, fintech, so on and so forth.
Right.
We have created more than 15 Atal community innovation centers, which is for taking innovations and the entrepreneurship ecosystem to the interiors of the country, the unserved and the underserved regions of the country, because we want to take innovation beyond the Bangalores and the Gurgaons of the world.
Right. Interesting.
So these are the ecosystems, these are the institutions that we are creating, and then over and above that, we also have a couple of programs where we fund innovators directly for their innovations. We run open innovation challenges known as Atal New India Challenges, as well as Atal Research and Innovation for Small Enterprises, where the idea is we work with the ministries of India, ministries of the Government of India, take their problem statements, put it in the public domain, get solutions, take innovative technology-based solutions to solve those challenges with an idea or with an objective to improve the government service delivery.
Very interesting.
Or to an extent, governance itself.
Super. I'm buzzing with questions right now, and given that I've seen kind of incubation grow, right, and there are it's easier said than done, right? I mean, this is massive challenge, and you know what I mean, right? I mean, globally, when you look at incubation has not been a very, very successful model, not been a very sustainable model, right? And that's largely because of a variety of challenges that one experiences, right? But before I do that, right, Ishta, I would love to understand, you've given me a broad statistic in terms of the impact that you've tried to sort of create, right? What I would love to understand is what are the number of startups, for example, that have been incubated, right? What's the kind of, say, employment that they've been able to go out and create? what are the numbers say on the funding lines? What kind of a growth have they had? I'd love to understand. I know it's too short a conversation to, I think, understand all of that. But if you could give me a larger sense of it, I think it'll be very interesting.
Sure. So before I come to numbers, there's just one more thing that I'd like to say is that,
Sure.
you were asking us what's the difference between Startup India and us. So Startup
Right.
India works directly with the startups, and they work on things like improving the ease of doing business, improving the tax regimes, improving the regulations. What we are working towards is creating the ecosystem itself that can nurture better innovations and that can create or give kids, because with
Sure.
Tinkering Labs, you start as early as 6th grade. And we want to create that confidence in kids that they can be innovators and they can solve the challenges for their own community themselves.
Right.
So the second thing that we are also doing very, very differently is we're trying to make innovation inclusive. Inclusive in terms of geography. So we are trying to spread our institutions across the country. Inclusion in terms of gender. So we have a focus for any institution which is more open towards supporting women entrepreneurs. Sure. And 70% of our ATLs are in girls' schools or at least co-ed schools.
Right.
Inclusive in terms of geographic regions, so that they are decoupled from the more mature ecosystems like Bangalore and Gurgaon that I just mentioned. Also inclusive in terms of languages. So we are going to launch a very large program, a nationwide initiative, which will decouple the creative expression from the language of transaction in the innovation ecosystem. So you'll hear about it in a few days, and I'm not going to talk about it now because it's going to be launched in a big way soon. But that is the level of inclusivity that we are trying to create for the innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Right.
Having said that, in the past 5 years, like I said, we have created more than 9,000 adult tinkering labs, which engages more than 5,000 mentors of change which work on a pro bono basis with the tinkering labs and the students of the tinkering labs. We've created more than 70 incubators and that collectively have supported close to 2,300 startups, out of which about 1/3 of them are women-based, women-led startups.
Right.
All these tinkering labs have reached more than 70 lakh students. What else can I tell you in terms of numbers? We have more, the number of projects that have come out of these tinkering labs is also in lakhs. So yes, I mean, these are very early success indicators. Of course, I can go in a lot of detail, but yeah,
no, listen, I think, when I ask you that question, and I think, I think one thing which stood out, right, is this, the way this government has acted and reacted to the and the way they've been able to, kind of bring in that momentum, which is just so much more important, right? I think they've looked at innovation in a very different way, right? They've tried to institutionalize many things that you kind of talked about, right? And I think I completely agree with when you say that, these are early days. And honestly, for a country which is as large as we are, that operates across so many stratas, so many language complexity and stuff like that. I think these are very, very early indicators, but they are very impressive indicators, Ishita, right? I think the way you kind of reached out, the kind of infrastructure that you've created is absolutely phenomenal in many, many ways. And I think the good part is you're empowering institutions to build that capability, right? To eventually deliver, which essentially means that they'll become sustainable over a period of time. Ishita, I'm going to move to some very critical aspects, right, of the construct of these AIM incubators, right? Tell us, what does an institution which has, for example, which houses an AIM incubator, right? What are some of the things that they're going to offer? Are they any different from the regular incubators that we've had? Where does that? I mean, the shift is important to understand, right? How are they unique in many, many ways? Because now a lot of states also coming up with very, very similar initiatives, right? And like I said, right at the outside, the biggest of all problems is that there is a sense of confusion, right? Amid people, amid entrepreneurs. Who's doing what, right? Which is the agency? What does BuyRag do, for example, right? What does DPIIT do, right? Just that clutter, right? So help us comprehend that a little better, please.
Sure. So in terms of incubators, the way we are probably a little different from the various other ministries is, one, of course, we've tried to make wherever possible very minor changes in the guidelines itself to improve the performance of the incubators. There is I don't know if I should be saying this publicly, but there is a critique that some of the government funded incubators do not perform well.
Sure.
So what we have tried to do is we look upon ourselves as angel investors.
Right.
So giving of the grant to set up the incubator is only the beginning of the journey. The real work starts
Right.
after that.
Right.
So what we have done is we have a online dashboard, monitoring dashboard, where all the incubators are supposed to upload their performance
Sure.
data every month. So we can
Right.
actually on a real time track their performance in terms of the inputs and the outputs that they're
Right.
giving.
Sure.
Second thing is we have gone out and done a very massive capacity building program for all the incubators. So it's not like a batch of a few, but the entire portfolio of about 35 plus incubators of Atal Innovation Mission have undergone a very detailed 6-month training program. And incubation is actually closer to a skill than it is to a theory subject. So you need to learn it by doing it. And therefore we had the incubators mentored by others who understand this ecosystem better and who actually talked about the specific challenges that every incubator faces. And they've tried to help the incubator in building upon their incubator, make it more sustainable, think through what is the unique offering that they have. The other thing that we have done is we bring a lot of industry partnerships to our incubators.
Right.
From multiple perspectives. One of course, get whatever possible mentorship resources for the startups. And the most important thing is after a startup has become, tested its technology and stabilized, then the biggest bottleneck is market access.
Sure.
And of course, investor access.
Right.
That's what we are trying to do through, bringing these industry partnerships, a lot of them corporates or large foundations who would want to interact with the startups, either mentor them or figure out a way of potential collaboration, wherever possible, of course,
right,
in their respective areas of interest.
Sure. Interesting. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, so these are some of the things that we keep trying to do is engage with the incubators on a very constant basis, try to do knowledge building sessions, interactive sessions, so on and so forth, to keep them engaged and keep the startup also engaged.
Super. Ishita, I have a bunch of questions on the industry side of things, right? But before I come to that, I would love to, understand a little more about, some of the key pillars within the AIM, say the ecosystem offering, right? Now, the first one is physical infra, right? And this is more important, especially at the back of COVID, right? COVID is kind of literally made physical infrastructure irrelevant in the entire scheme of things, and that's not just for incubation, but that's for literally education, office infrastructure. I think everything commercial real estate has actually gone for a toss, right? We've kind of shifted overnight into being a very savvy digital economy, right? And that's not just a tier A phenomenon. That's a phenomenon which we're seeing across the board, right? A tier 2 city, to an extent, even rural, right? I mean, nobody could have in their wildest of dreams imagined how quick are we going to be in terms of adopting tech, right? And then ordering it. I was in a recent conversation with a founder, right, where he said that earlier it used to be 70-80% orders from tier A cities, tier 1 cities, and then the rest from all of India. And he's saying that within a matter of a year and a half, it's all reversed, right? The numbers are just so much more phenomenal, right? Now, what happens in an environment like that? Because a lot of funding that you've done for AIM is essentially to provide for that infrastructure, right? What happens in an environment like that?
Well, so in some sense, the transition was slightly easier for us because since our inception, AIM was more a very, very tech-oriented organization. It of course helps being based in NITI Aayog because that's how NITI Aayog functions. I mean, we try and leverage on technology wherever possible. So like I said, I mean, we have this digital online monitoring system or a dashboard for all our beneficiaries. I mean, all the schools are on that, all the incubators are on that, so on and so forth. What we and I'll give you an example of how helped our beneficiaries transition in the time of COVID. So we launched a Tinker from Home festival for our students. So they could not access the schools and they could not use on the school infrastructure. But what we did is we created self-study modules on all kinds of frontier technologies like AI, drones, mobile coding for games, and I mean, you name it, and we have a self-study module on it. And students at home could download that module on their phone, on their laptop, or on their parents' phones, and they could actually tinker from home.
Right.
So we have a bunch of such resources which is available online, which is in the public domain. Anyone can, I mean, ATL or non-ATL, you can test your own knowledge by looking at the page and see how good you are at creating a drone.
But does that makes you more an edtech today? I mean, has your role changed, right? I think that's question number one. Question number two is, I think going forward, I think everybody's kind of questioning the relevance of real estate, right? I mean, you hear of most tech companies, right? All of them are saying that, about 50-60% of their staff perpetually should be working from home, right? And that's a very different, shift, right? From what it earlier was, right? I mean, these are companies that owned massive campuses, right? The idea was to engage their employees within the campus, right? Sorry, I'm kind of digressing, but I'm trying to make a point here that physical real estate has become just so much more irrelevant, right? Does that also means, which is my second question, right? Does that means we're going to see 300, 400 of AIM incubators? Because now there is no need for physical infrastructure, right? You can digitally enable, these institutions just need to sort of have a kind of a, that basic digital infrastructure available to actually become an AIM incubator. Is there a shift that is coming to your strategy of having more of these coming in, which also actually makes you more efficient, because there's a substantially large grant that you actually provide to a lot of these institutions, right? To an extent, that also becomes a motivation for many of these guys to apply for this, right? Does this changes the relationship, right? So the two questions are you becoming an edtech? And second is, is the relationship going to change?
Sure. So yes and no for both questions, actually. So there, I would agree that the importance of real estate has gone down. And in fact, when COVID hit, we actually did special sessions to help our incubators transition to provide virtual incubation and, the knowledge sessions around it, and helped, mentor those incubators ourselves as well. But in some cases, there is the need for the touch and feel. Especially for the deep tech startups, they actually need a lab to work in. They need to improve upon their product. They need to test a few things, and that's where the lab comes in, and it cannot be done virtually.
Sure.
So yes, there are some kind of startups that can probably work from home, and virtual mentoring and virtual connections is possible. But for a good number of startups, and from the beginning, Atal Innovation Mission has focused on deep tech startups and sector intensive startups. They would probably still need a lab. So maybe they reduce the requirement of the office space that is available at incubators, but the lab part of it definitely continues to have some importance. It's a mixed answer. So yes, we have helped our incubators pivot to a virtual incubation, which we were anyways trying to do earlier also, even before COVID hit, because virtual incubation is at times more effective than physical incubation. But yes, COVID has sort of accelerated that journey.
Interesting. Are we going to see 300, 400 incubators coming up in India next under the AIM construct, right? Do you think that's possible?
Well, you're raising a very fundamental question, which is
and I know there are no clear answers, right? This is more a fun question, Ishita.
Yes. In my mind, I think we need to create a very new model for incubation for the country. Because and whether we call it incubators or we call it something else is different. But I think thanks to the Startup India, Stand Up India program launched by the government of India, by the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, startups have become mainstream. In some sense, there's a change in the psyche of the person, of the people, of the masses. So now startups it's like, it's fashionable to have a startup. In fact, it's honorable to have a startup to an extent.
I think, if you're looking to grow your organization exponentially, right? I think, and that's for any business leader who's going to watch this session, right? I think hiring somebody who comes with a startup experience, right? You're hiring for 10 people, right? I think that's the kind of capacity building that happens in the process, right?
Absolutely.
Ishita, I'm going to move to another important question, right? Now, when you talk of incubators in general, this is not specific to AIM incubators, right? But when you talk of incubators in general, right? Very, very critical part of that is the mentor board that you kind of put together. In your case, it's a centralized place, right? Where there are Atal Mentors of Change, for example, right? That's a program that you run, and and across this pool, all of these incubators have an access to these resources, right? Now, two questions on this one. One is that COVID has made a lot of so, for example, a lot of mentors who really sign up. It's a mix of people who are enthusiasts And second is their service providers, right? And it just becomes so much more difficult for people to navigate between and choose between the two, right? The other thing which is very, very important is that, a lot of the skill set that a lot of these people, for example, offered is now, I mean, the requirement of that is going to reduce drastically, right? Uh, Post-COVID, we are essentially in very, very uncharted territories, right? The consumer market has changed completely, right? So, for example, somebody who comes from a marketing background, right, who's done, say, 20, 30 years of marketing, right, is today a mentor of change, right? A mentor of change. His skills or her skills might not be relevant for the the consumer who's coming in tomorrow, right? Somebody who comes from an operations background, right? I mean, what they engineered was a product life cycle for 5, 6, 7 years, right? Now a lot of that is shifted. I mean, fads are going to fly much faster. That essentially means your entire supply chain will have to be there. So where I'm coming from is that the requirement for mentors that you need to have has to be just so much more dynamic, right? Unfortunately, a large part of the working world, who are experienced to support these startups and help them in their, journeys and processes, might not necessarily be prepared to, kind of, or comprehend the shift that has come in, right? What's your take on that? Does that means, or do you think that's going to impact the way these startups, the outcome in startups, right, that are housed in these incubators? What's your sense of it? Is there a change in strategy that you're taking on that one?
Again, on that one, I mean, the biggest initiative that we did on the mentors bit was we started with the Mentors of Change program for the Atal Tinkering Labs. And because it was recently launched, you will actually be pleasantly surprised to know that we got more than 9,000 applications from people from different industry sectors, age groups, walks of life, who wanted to support and work with the Atal Tinkering Labs. And we have about 5,000 mentors who were selected and allocated to different schools as of now, maybe more than 5,000, who are working with these working with the schools and the children on an active basis right now. So yes, there is a slight change of strategy in terms of probably not the selection process, but the fact that there's constant engagement with the mentors also. So we actually recognize the mentors who are working more actively, who are coming up with their own innovative approach to work with the startups and the children. We've created regional mentors of change, which is, and then we recognize a mentor of the month to be able to make sure that there is active engagement of the mentors. They in turn mentor other mentors of their region and then share best practices. So we go beyond just the selection of the mentors and tagging them to a school or a startup. There's constant engagement with the mentors. There's also constant growth, and we stay connected with them to make sure that what they are talking about is relevant, it is important for the children, so on and so forth.
Interesting. Ishta, I have run an accelerator, right, and a fairly successful one, right. One of the constant challenges that I, for example, came across, right, was the impact that was, so we brought in a lot of industry experts to come in and be mentors, right, and help these startups in the process. Now, a couple of problems that we face, right, is that when you bring in an industry expert, now that person is possibly dealing with much, for example, say larger budgets, right? So say you're bringing in a CFO of an organization, right? Or a CIO of an organization, or CTO of an organization, or CPO of an organization, right? Now, these are people who are essentially dealing with very large teams. They are people who are dealing with very, very large budgets, right? Now, in a startup environment, these are startups that are calibrated for, they're essentially calibrated and optimizing their survival, right? By the day. What we kind of realized in the process was there was a lot of, while of course these were big names, right? Two issues, right? One, their ability to relate to a problem which was as small was very limited. That's number one. Number two was that a lot of them, the way they wanted these early stage businesses to, the path that they wanted them to, basically follow or pursue was not necessarily correct, right? We could see that because we were handling possibly 10 or 15 of them in a batch, right? Now, and that just makes this, and that's a very, very important piece, because that just makes the operations of an incubator very difficult in that sense, right? How do you ensure that that impact is in the right direction? The path that startup follows, or the tweak or the pivot that happens, right, is in the right direction. How do you ensure all of that? Because that's so subjective, right?
Yes, a very, very good question, Ashu. A very critical one for the mentoring bit for the startups. And let me tell you, I mean, not every mentor will work for every startup. So it's a very the matching is very important, and it's very critical to the success of the mentor-mentee relationship.
Right.
And what we have done is, when we created a mentor guidelines for startups, the mentors who are going to be mentoring, working with the startups, we said we actually put them into multiple buckets. So we had startups that would work. We had mentors that would work with the startups on specific problems.
Sure.
Okay, I want to create a revenue plan for my products and solutions, or what should be the pricing strategy, or what should be the IPR strategy that I need to take. So there are functional or subject matter experts kind of startups who would work with you to tackle only that particular part of the entire problem.
Right.
And then we have strategy mentors who would work with you on your overall business plan, overall expansion, what target market should you focus on, so on and so forth.
Sure.
So there are different categories of mentors. And those mentors are connected with startups at different points in time to be able to sort of attack the startup from a different aspect or a perspective. Sure. So that is one of the aspects. And the second thing is, one meeting with the mentor does not really tell you anything. It has to be a period, there has to be a chemistry matching between the mentor and the mentee. And it's only over a period of multiple meetings that, this has to evolve as a relationship like any other.
But Ishita, tell me this, right? Yeah. So doesn't that brings in a certain lag, right? Because now they're part of a system, right? A system that they have to follow. So for example, if I'm not part of a system, right? I mean, I can choose to pursue my path, right? I can choose to engage with people across the board, right? When you start doing this, right? Because of course, I mean, at the end of the day, all of this is happening on public funds, right? What that means is that you'll have to, register and document a lot of stuff that happens in the process, right? Does that mean this could lead into a potential lag, or are you engineering it in a way that to avoid say any run-ins, any conflicts, the outputs?
Not at all. So there's the one thing that we try and do is make sure that the impact created is maximum, and the beneficiaries don't get any kind of delay because of our operations. So first of all, there's no public funds involved here, because the entire program is pro bono basis. All the mentors that work with us, they are not given any honorarium, at least from our side. Sure. If the startup and the mentor have any sort of an arrangement, it is completely internal to both of them. We don't get into it.
When I say funds, I mean for the AIM incubators.
Sure. No, I understand. And the second thing is that this is a pool of startups that pool of mentors that we've created for our startups, which is available for all the incubators. That does not mean that they don't have their own respective pools of mentors that they've created in the local area. And the startups are also open to reach out to any mentors that they like. So this startup pool that we've created is the mentor pool that we've created is not thrust upon them. It's not a binding for them. They are open to leverage it if they want. Or they can reach out to anyone else that they want. And of course, the incubator is there to guide them and connect them with the right person.
Ishita, when I actually hear what you say, right, I'm just, I feel for you and your entire team, right? With the kind of impact and at least the orientation that you have, right? And the impact that you want to create and what's happening at the last mile, right? I think it's just such a long chain, right? And I'm sure there are moments when you want to jump into it, right? Saying that, listen, let me just tackle it and solve it, right? It's just so much more difficult, right? In that sense, because it's a large ship, right, that you're running. And this is one side of the discussion that can keep going on, right? And there are no clear answers, right? And I think anybody who's been in the incubation space, acceleration space, funding space, I think would understand. I'm going to move into the industry partnership of things, right? And that's an important part of this discussion. Something that you kind of, in your capacity as as a unit, you're kind of really evangelizing for it, right? How responsive have industry been, right? I mean, the regulation came in where there was a 2% which was earmarked of profits that should have been kind of spent on incubators, right? Incubator adoption was something which was huge, right? Unfortunately, there's little which has happened in that front. A lot of those funds essentially are, there was like a list of 3, 4, 5 things, right? But a lot of those CSR funds essentially going in for more marketing driven activities, right? Industry is still not seeing a very relevant outcome of sorts. While of course the promoters are investing through their family office in their personal capacities, industry is still not taking that call, right? I haven't come across any listed entity, for example, making a disclosure that there is a certain amount of money, could be 50, 70 crores, 100 crores, whatever, right? For a very large market like India, earmarked for say innovation or say supporting an incubator. That's not happening. Where are we on that? What are the challenges that exist in that ecosystem?
Okay, so I'll answer to this at multiple levels. So
Sure.
first of all, I would say that my perception is at least that the industry is really warming up to the startup and the innovation ecosystem right now as we speak.
Okay.
To give you an example, we have at least 50 plus partners who work with us, who provide an added layer of value add to all the beneficiaries that we have, may it be incubators, may it be tinkering labs, may it be other programs that we have. And these partners include not just the corporate sector, but also large foundations, research labs, so on and so forth. I mean, it's a very good mix that we have. Other than that, if you go out in the ecosystem, you will see a lot of accelerators that are actually initiated by corporates. Because everyone now wants to dip into, since startups have become mainstream, everyone wants to dip into this pool and sort of take advantage when they can. And this is like is easiest or quickest, or should I say the most cost-effective way to have an outsourced R&D department. I mean, just do a search of startups. If you find someone who's relevant for you, either see if you can do a partnership with them, or take them on and just acquire them, and you can have a new product. So a lot of startups, so a lot of larger corporates, even mid-sized corporates, are warming up to work with startups. A lot of them take the first sort of dip into the pool through working with organizations like ours or Startup India or the Office of the PSA. That is also trying to create a bridge between the corporate sector and the startup ecosystem and the academic ecosystem as well. But a lot of them have actually their own independent startup programs also. So I would, and I think that at the end of the day, the startup ecosystem cannot really reach its peak till there is collaboration between the academia, the industry, and the startups.
Interesting. But is there a financial number that is there of course, there is, at the end of the day, it's the government, right? AIM is government's initiative, right? Now corporates will warm up to it, but is there do you see a financial commitment that they are making? Are they pensioned to do that, right? Because honestly, a lot of them who are running these initiatives privately will not be more than 30, 40 of them, right, across the country. And we need many, many more of them. And I think that's possibly the reason, government has taken that kind of a responsibility, saying that, listen, we're going to set it up, right? Industry is not doing it. We're going to empower institutions to enable innovation, right? What's happening? I mean, what are the numbers like? I mean, are there numbers, or do you think this is too early a time right now to be talking about numbers? I think we should start looking at numbers, given also COVID has happened, right? That's possibly accelerated the seriousness. So do you think we're going to see better reflection of that through numbers and many other incubators coming in the next couple of years? Is that your sense?
The one thing that we lack as a country is a little bit of documentation and aggregation of data on paper. So we don't have very good numbers in terms of what is the flow towards the startups that is coming directly from the industry. I don't think there would be an aggregate numbers of it. But there is more and more interest that is definitely happening that I can, at least from the position that I am in and the bird's eye view of the industry that I get to see. Because, for example, organizations like CII and, the industry chambers have also started having startup cells and startup forums, which are trying, and everyone is trying to pitch in and do their bit towards this ecosystem.
Right.
So definitely, I think we'll see more and more of these conversations happening, and we'll have more and more synergies coming up.
Ishta, I think no conversation can be complete without talking of funding, right? Now, we've seen, the kind of upsurge that we've seen, or the kind of the confidence that we've seen of a lot of global investors coming in last 1 year, little over 1.5 years, right, has been absolutely phenomenal, right? We continue to, I mean, you've been there the longest, right? 15 years is a long time, right? Uh, you know, each one of us continue to talk about lack of funds, right? For innovation to kind of uh, kind of grow in a
Yeah,
market like India, right? Uh, Last 1.5 years has been absolutely phenomenal. We've seen
phenomenal. Yes.
so much money coming in, right? It's been unbelievable, right? Many actually professionals, mid-career professionals, actually leaving their jobs and kind of trying out, which is phenomenal, right?
Yes.
Because now you have a
Yes.
very intelligent, interesting, experienced lot of people who are now wanting to be a part of this entire thing, right? And that's a very strong sign of us becoming or moving towards that that agenda and that milestone of being a startup nation, right? Uh, Also, what has happened is a lot of funds, Ishita, they've set up early stage initiatives, right? So they've set up, either some of them have set up accelerators. For example, you have a Sequoia Surge, Accel has
Yeah.
started something. So many of these funds have started something or the other. They've started to engage with businesses much early on. Now, what is happening in that environment is that the good startups are raising money literally at an idea stage, right? What that essentially means is that there are much larger set of players who are left out, who are not necessarily uh, that efficient, right? Now, when they come to these incubators and accelerators, right, that's their expectation of funding. And there are government initiatives where you are across, you would and many other such departments will be actually funding a lot of these businesses, right? With an expectation that VCs are going to come in and they're going to fund the next rounds, and then these organizations are going to go on to become larger, right? Uh, that's a dichotomy. There's a complete disconnect, right? Because they've already bought out in the market. What you're funding might not, I mean, the growth that you might want to see might not necessarily be as relevant. What's your sense of it? What do you make out of it? I mean, is there a way you need to fast track that process? Do we need to cultivate a culture of equity investing in a country where you have more and more and more VCs coming in, right? So that the pool becomes larger and it's now available for many other mature businesses that are coming out of these incubators as well. What's your sense of it?
So, Ashu, again, this is a very deep question, and I think that yes, there is a gap in funding of tech startups.
Sure.
That is there for sure, and there are certain programs of the government of India that are supporting or doing a little bit in this area. So for example, BIRAC has a wonderful program where it has completely changed the construct of the biotech industry over a past like 7 to 8 years time, and we see a lot of biotech and pharma startups coming up. But yes, on an overall ecosystem perspective, I would say that there is when it comes to deep tech startups, which are like science and technology based innovative startups, there is a little bit of dearth of funding because the return in such cases is a little longer, and the gestation period is a little longer as compared to other just IT-based startups. However, that trend is also changing very, very gradually. So we have seen Sequoia and Bloom, some of the players who have started sort of taking bets in the science, deep tech startups also. So this is something I think the market will take care of in itself. Of course, wherever possible, the government is trying to push. In fact, right now we are running 2 programs. One is called AIM iLeap, which is for connecting startups with investors and potential customers, and another one is AIM Prime, where we're trying to do some kind of a accelerator program. Again, them pro bono basis for expediting the growth of science and tech startups, as well as connecting them with investors and helping them from the government side also wherever possible. Sure. So we are doing our bit. We are doing a lot of value add programs going beyond just giving the grant and working with the beneficiaries, but also doing cross vertical programs to be able to support the startups from the 360-degree perspective.
Interesting. Ishita, I know I know life is not easy, right? I think the kind of impact that you're trying to drive and create, right, just requires so much of intensity, effort, right? And I think the challenges are mammoths, right? You're steering a large ship. It's not easy. We're towards the end of our conversation. Ishita, my last question usually I think in every conversation is, what are the next 2 years like, right? I would have loved to ask you a 5-year question, but we are just in very, very dynamic times, right? What are the next 2 years like?
The next 2 years, I think it's going to be bigger, better, larger, and more and more dynamic. You'll see more and more achievements coming out of the Indian startups trying to solve Indian challenges,
Right.
the socioeconomic challenges of the people of India that are going to be tackled in a much better way with the Indian startups. So far, they would be large startups, companies from other countries coming in, but you will see more and more Indian startups actually go out and also not just solve the challenges of the people of India, but the world. And I think in 2 years' time, we are going to move up the ladder, and from the third largest ecosystem, I'm sure it's going to get, move towards the
Right.
number one in a few years' time. That's what I see, and I also see a big shift in the government perspective itself,
Right.
thanks to the Honorable Prime Minister, where a lot of ministries, departments, and states are trying to make the shift and try and see how they can absorb innovation, how can they can incorporate innovation and work more and more with the startups to improve governance as well as public service delivery. So I think that's where we're headed.
Super. Ishta, this is a thing which is very, very close to my heart, right? While I, of course, agree and understand a lot of challenges that you're going through, my personal assumption is, of what we're looking, right, is that I think India is now one large homogeneous market, right? Our behavioral tendencies and our consumption tendencies are going to be exactly that of what possibly a consumer in the US is, right? As evolved. Financing has become just so much more dynamic, right? I think we're going to be in a very, very different environment, right, going forward.
Yes.
Indian problems might cease to exist, right? Our problems essentially came from the fact that we existed in silos, right? I think that is going away because we are converging into just about very definitive environment. Just about those 4, 5, 6 screens, and a very significant influence, right? Our consumption patterns are becoming just so much more visible, right? So we are now going to be, my senses, we're going to be a very, very evolved economy in 2 years, right? Our priorities are going to be very clear. Our consumption patterns are going to be erratic. Our preferences are going to come from wherever, right? But it's going to be a very, very interesting time. I think that is possibly going to open up opportunities for many, many startups that are going to get created. And I think creativity is going to become so much more important. Something that you are evangelizing and enabling at Atal Tinkering Labs, right?
Yes.
You're kind of seeding in that thought. You're giving them the understanding of a possibility of what building a product could mean, right? What innovation could mean. This is just so much more important, right? Ishta, with that, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you. I mean, how I want these sessions to keep going on, but I think we're gonna bring this one to a close here and save a lot of those points for our next conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Loved every bit of this conversation.
Thank you, Ashu. It was a pleasure to speak with you, and everyone who will probably be joining us and hearing us. It was a pleasure, and look forward to have more such conversations with you and answer more such questions.
Thank you, Ishita.
Thank you. Bye-bye.